Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio in Atlanta, Georgia. It's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by Kennesaw State University's Executive MBA program, the accelerated degree program for working professionals looking to advance their career and enhance their leadership skills. And now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get started, it's important to recognize our sponsor, KSU's Executive MBA program. Without them, we couldn't be sharing these important stories. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Jason Schneider, and he is the co-founder and managing partner with Schneider Williamson Personal Injury Law. Welcome.
Hi, Lee.
I am so excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us about your firm. How are you serving folks?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to share information with you and your audience. We're a personal injury law firm here in Atlanta. We have 3 attorneys and 8 staff total, and we represent victims of injuries primarily that occur in auto accidents, but really any kind of injury you're in. And we help folks navigate through the complex insurance requirements and, if necessary, take their cases to court.
So what's your backstory? How'd you choose this direction to go in?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I graduated from Emory Law School and actually went to work for a law firm in downtown Atlanta that specialized in defending the insurance companies in these kind of claims, and did that for 2 different firms for about 5 years, and then decided I'd rather be representing the folks that were injured in accidents. So I switched sides, or came to the light, or whatever phrase people use. And since that time, I've been practicing personal injury law on behalf of injured folks.
So how do personal injury law firms like yours compete against these huge billboard attorneys that have huge call centers, and they seem to be just bombarding like carpet bombing you with their brand?
Yeah, and that's so true, Lee. And that is something, we are a small business, and that is something I think that's probably universal to any small business is competing with the big guys. So the answer is I really don't try. I have to go in a completely different direction. I do it through networking. Here's an example right here, talking to people through your show. So really networking through other attorneys, and just, we do some stuff on social media, but we do not try to compete in that landscape of the billboards and the TV, because the big guys just suck that up, and, they spend a lot of money, and they're very successful at that. But there's a large market, and there are also folks that don't want to be represented by those behemoths. So there is room in this market for smaller firms that specialize in customer care, customer satisfaction, and doing a good job for people.
Now, I don't think the regular person understands that just because there are pictures on the billboard doesn't mean that that's the person that's representing you. A lot of times those are just call centers, and they're just funneling them through a system, and who knows who could be representing you.
That is so true, and that is why a lot of times clients do come to us, because they do recognize that. Or frankly, sometimes they hire one of those firms and quickly realize that they're not forget about talking with a lawyer on the billboard. They may not even be talking with a lawyer at all, just like you say, dealing with a call center. So when you get to talk with our firm, a smaller firm, you get that kind of personal attention. People reach me directly or reach other attorneys in my office, and that is something that is very valuable, to have someone with my level of experience actually representing you and talking to you, giving you advice. And that is something that, of course, the bigger firms just can't because of the scale.
So let's try to educate our listeners a little bit about what should they do if they get in a car accident. I mean, they're happening probably every hour of every day here in Atlanta. So I'm in the car, somebody hits me.
Yeah, I did want to talk about some tips, things you can do to protect yourself and increase the chances of getting a good recovery in the event you have the unfortunate situation of being in a car wreck. And the number one thing you can do actually is, before you're in a car wreck, something you can do today is pull out your declarations page, your deck sheet, the the page that says what coverage you have. There's a myth that there's a myth that people have what's called full coverage, and that really what full coverage does is protects the car, because oftentimes you have a note, and the note is issued by a bank or the car dealer, and what the note means is that your car is covered. So you have collision, you have comprehensive, you have coverage in the event your car is damaged. What you don't necessarily have is what's known as uninsured motorist coverage. Now, that is an optional coverage that you can keep or reject. And what uninsured motorist coverage does is it protects you in two situations. One, most people understand. Two, they may not. So the traditional uninsured motorist coverage is if you're hit by somebody that has no coverage. And then, of course, that will not only fix your car, but pay you for your personal injuries. as it's known in the industry, also covers underinsured situations, which is very common because the minimum coverage in Georgia is $25,000 per person, $50,000 per occurrence, $25,000 for property damage. And many people have cars worth more than that. Many people have injuries worth more than that. So if you have coverage, underinsured motorist coverage in larger limits than the 25, 50, 25, then your own company will step in and provide additional coverage to you in the event you're hit by someone that either has no insurance or does not have adequate insurance to protect you. So that's something everybody in your audience can do today, is just check their coverage. It's not a super expensive coverage. It's really the most valuable coverage you can have.
Now, you're talking about the insurance company, and I would imagine that a lot of people maybe are just trusting their insurance person to set them up with everything they need. But it sounds like that it might be a good idea to have somebody like you or on your team kind of at least share the other side, because you're the one dealing with them if something goes wrong.
Yeah, and this again is a universal message. It pays to be an informed consumer. Unfortunately, I've had situations where clients have been with the same insurance agent for many, many years and thought they had really good coverage, and then are in an accident and turns out they don't. So, yeah, take out your deck page, review it. I think if you called your insurance agent or adjuster, they would go through it with you, and you'd see what exactly you had and didn't have. Because certainly, I mean, if you want to buy more coverage, the insurance company will sell it to you. It's kind of surprising to me that they don't always sell it, because it would be a premium to them, but I can't really speak to why they do or do not. But yeah, then of course you can reach out to a law firm such as mine or any other insurance professional and get independent advice as to what kind of coverage you have. Because surprisingly enough, many people are underinsured, either because they don't have the coverage I just mentioned, or there's other things that they may not have that they really need, such as sufficient liability coverage. I mentioned earlier that you only have to carry $25,000 per person, $50,000 per occurrence. That is not enough money if, unfortunately, you cause, or somebody driving your car with your permission causes an accident.
So the types of insurance we should have may not be what we have, and it's a good idea to check either with your insurance provider and or an independent person to give you kind of maybe a less biased version of the choices that are out there and the ramifications of what happens if you try to use it. I mean, in medicine, you would call that a second opinion, right? So right.
Have a second opinion on your insurance coverage.
So then every time somebody gets hit, is that something they should call a lawyer as kind of the default position? Like, how do you decide what's lawyer worthy?
Right. Another great question. And, I hate to kind of say something that sounds like I'm just advertising or promoting myself, but I've just seen so many situations where people thought that either one, the insurance company would take care of them, or that they didn't really think they were injured, or that the other person had accepted fault, so they went about their way, and then later on, things fell apart for them. So, unfortunately, the best advice is, yes, seek medical attention right away, and seek legal representation or a legal consultation right away, because you just never know. I've had so many clients drive away from an accident, think they were fine, and turns out they weren't. They had some hidden injury or injury that developed over time, and that happens a lot. And then, of course, you have a situation where somebody causes a wreck and says, I'm going to cover it. Here's my information. Please don't call the police. You go about your way, and then it turns out the claim gets denied. So I hate to even say these things because you'd like to be able to trust people and insurance companies to treat you fairly, but the fact of the matter is oftentimes that's not what happens.
So walk me through, if this is a friend of yours or your kid, they get rear-ended, what are the first maybe 3 to 5 things they should do immediately after that happens, and including, contact an attorney?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention that because when my son was in high school, he was he was in a wreck, and he did call me and he said, "What should I do, Dad?" So, I said, call the police. Even though it's minor, call the police. You want to have a record of what happened. And that is the number one thing to do. And make sure that if there are any witnesses, sometimes people stop and say, "Are you okay?" But people are busy, right? They want to go along their way. I mean, if somebody does stop and ask you if you're okay, say, "Hey, can I get your phone number?" Put it in my phone. You have a card. Because as I said, later on, oftentimes even obvious claims are being denied. So see if there's any witnesses. Of course, now we all have cell phones, so you can snap a few photos. Snap a few photos of the damage to your car, the damage to the other car. So those are the immediate things you do at the scene. And then, of course, just wait for the police and share your information. Only answer the questions asked. There's two sides to it. We're talking about if somebody rear-ends you, but the other side of it is, God forbid, you've caused an accident, right? Or maybe you're in a situation where it's not all that clear who had the red light, who had the green light. So if you're in a situation where somebody's blaming you for the accident, well, you want to be very careful about what you say and how you word things. So the number one thing is to just stay at the scene, provide information, and get all the necessary information you can.
And you want to document whatever you can document. And people, like you said, I mean, I've had personally situations that I had a thing that happened to me where at the scene, the person apologized, took responsibility, but later on they concocted a whole other story that was just, made up to take the blame off of them.
Right. And had you called the police?
Yes.
Okay. Did it work out okay?
Yeah, it all worked out at the end, but it was just because at the moment, they're apologetic doesn't mean after, their spouse starts talking to them and their friends that all of a sudden they're like, what, you might be able to get away with this,
Sure. Very unfortunate, but true. Human nature being what it is. So, yeah, that's why witnesses are great. And now, that often happens. There's somebody seeing it. And of course, now also we have a lot of cameras, which helps a lot. There's either cameras from the municipalities or the cities. And then, of course, many businesses have cameras. So we've had a lot of success when there has been a contested claim. The most common one is not a rear ender, obviously. It's like in the traffic light, who has the right of way. Because if a police officer comes to a scene and there's been an accident in the middle of the intersection, somebody's turned in front of you, and that person says, "I had the green light," and you say you had the green light or he had a red light, oftentimes the officer doesn't know who's at fault. So this is a little different from your situation. This is a situation where you're in the right, but the person that's caused the accident is not admitting it. So what do you do in that situation? A lot of times you can go around to the businesses right there and there's surveillance footage. We've had several cases where that kind of nailed it down. The old picture is worth 1,000 words. There's clear video of what happened. That is so common now. Law enforcement's going to do that on a crime. They're not necessarily going to do that on a car accident. So now we're back to if you contact an attorney early on, that's an investigation they can do. Usually businesses will keep that, but after, say, 7 days or 10 days, that just automatically erases and they re-record. But if you get legal help early on, perhaps that information is available to you and it can make the difference between whether your claim is successful or not.
And can you give people an idea of how many accidents are happening in the metro area?
I believe the figure's 1,000 a day.
1,000 a day.
Yeah.
That's just mind-blowing.
I know.
Now, you mentioned that as part of the way that you go to market is you network and partner with other folks. Can you talk about some of the partners that you work with and the different types of industries that they're in that I guess you all kind of work together and help each other, help the client get the best outcome?
Sure. Well, the number one thing, and this also relates to the second thing to do if you're in an accident, and that is to seek medical attention. Right? Even if you feel like you're not hurt or you're just sore, you certainly don't have to go to an emergency room. I'm not recommending people go to an emergency room. Emergency rooms are already very busy with very sick people. And if you're just sore and just not sure how you're feeling, perhaps you go home, you take some Advil, see how you feel the next day. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you wake up the next day and you're still sore, then go, maybe go to an urgent care, make an appointment to see your doctor. That's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, it provides an accurate history for the insurance company, because I've had so many clients that just wait to see how they're doing. They continue to take the Advil. They kind of try to tough it out. And then after about a week or 10 days, they say to themselves, I'm just not well. I just don't feel right. And then they call their doctor and they go see their doctor. Perhaps they have to wait another week for an appointment. So now they're maybe 2 weeks out from the accident when they have their first medical appointment. And guess what the insurance company says to that? Well, gee, you couldn't have been that hurt because you would have sought immediate medical attention. So that actually diminishes your claim. Of course, the insurance company really has an answer for anything, because if you go to the emergency room the day of, they say, well, why didn't you wait a minute to see how you were doing? So they're always going to have an answer for you. But the best thing to do is to seek immediate medical attention. And the reason I mentioned that is because you're asking me about sources of business if we're not advertisers or billboard lawyers. And frankly, getting to know doctors is something that's been successful for us because medical offices, chiropractic offices, physical therapy offices often see their patients that have been injured and want to make sure that they're properly represented for two reasons. One, just to make sure they have the right representation. And two, oftentimes people are uninsured. We were talking about auto insurance, but we really haven't talked about health insurance yet. And unfortunately, I think it's close to 50% of Georgians do not have health insurance. So oftentimes it's necessary for a person to get treated on what's known as a lien, which means that they have a lien on your settlement and that the doctor gets paid when the case settles. Just like if a roofer fixed your roof, he'd have a lien on your house, and if you didn't pay him, then of course when the house sold, he'd get paid. So that's what a health insurance lien is. Hospitals file that all the time. So any medical provider files a lien to get paid at the end of a case. So they're very interested in making sure their patient has the right representation.
So is there anything happening from a legislative standpoint that we should be aware of? Are there any new laws or bills coming up that maybe affects this industry or your firm and your clients?
There is a huge thing going on right now in the legislature. If anybody's following the news or reading the AJC, it's been a page one article. Governor Kemp has been pushing what's known as tort reform. There's a bill that's now passed the state Senate, is in the state House, that's going to very much affect injury trials in the state of Georgia. And, there are some things in there that probably are worth talking about, but there's some things in there that are just not really good for average Georgians. And unfortunately, it's being touted as a way to make Georgia a better state for business and to reduce insurance rates. But really, the truth is that it's not doing either of those things. It's just taking away victims' rights without really any guarantee or requirement that the insurance companies lower their rates or even keep the rates the same. So it's unfortunate. We can dive into some more of the details if you like, but in general, there is definitely a law in the legislature now that's going to affect people's rights when it comes to injury claims and injury trials. And
is there anything the listeners can do to at least learn more about this and maybe take some action?
Yes, if you are interested, obviously reach out to me. I'll be glad to talk to anybody about it. There's been a lot in the news about it. You can Google the law that's in the legislature. If you know who your legislator is, if you're interested, they're always interested in hearing from voters. So if it is something you're interested, I would recommend that people do educate themselves on this law and reach out to their legislator to say that we want you to protect us, the people, not necessarily the insurance companies. The insurance companies manage to always make huge profits. No matter how many claims they pay, they can raise their rates and adjust their claims so as to always come out fine. But oftentimes people are the ones that are hurt by laws that take away their rights to sue, or what jury trials look like, or the amounts of money they can recover in those cases. And of course, there are always those huge one-off cases that everybody wants to talk about. Remember, years ago, there was the McDonald's coffee cup case, and everybody said, well, why should you sue for that? Of course, that case ultimately settled for much less than what the verdict was. And when there is sometimes a very crazy verdict that makes people shake their heads and say, how could that be? Oftentimes, if you follow the story, you'll see that the verdict was overturned or significantly reduced. And taking away people's rights to a jury trial, taking away the decision, people that serve on the jury are just regular people, and taking away their right to, assuming that they're not going to do the right thing and really listen to the evidence, is really an insult to them, to regular Georgians, and to the jury system as a whole, which of course is guaranteed by our Constitution.
So what do you need more of, and how could we help? Are you looking for more relationships with those referrers, the chiropractors, the doctors, the physical therapists? Are you looking for more clients? Are you looking for people just to kind of reach out to you in case they are one of the 1,000 people who had an accident today?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Lee. Sure, we're very happy to represent people that have been hurt, and if you want kind of the more special attention, personal attention that you may not get from the billboard lawyers. And I didn't mean to cast any aspersions on them. They're great lawyers and they do great work, but it's a very different experience. I guess it might be the difference between going to a Home Depot or your local hardware store, and some people like the Home Depots and some would rather have, the local hardware store. So if your interest is more in the personal attention and, having a local lawyer represent you, then by all means, you can reach out to us. And the same thing for, physical therapists, chiropractors, doctors that may have a situation where they're treating their patients and their patients may not have the adequate insurance and they don't want to turn that. What's the first question you're asked when you go to a doctor's office? I think even before they ask what's wrong, or maybe second to that is, what's your health insurance, or do you have insurance? So for people that don't have insurance but need care, that's something that if a healthcare provider is working with a reputable law firm, they can rest assured they'll be compensated. Their lien will be paid at the end of the case. So yeah, those are the kind of people we're looking to talk to. Either people that have the unfortunate situation of being hurt, or providers that want to make sure that their patients can get seen and get treated, and that of course their bills get paid at the end of the case.
And if somebody wants to learn more, have a more substantive conversation with you or somebody on the team, what's the website? What's the best way to connect?
Sure. Thanks for asking. Again, my name's Jason Schneider. The name of my firm is Schneider Williamson. Our website is schneiderwilliamson.com, and our phone number and email is on the website. The general office number is 770-394-0047, and my email is jason@schneiderwilliamson.com.
And Schneider spelled SCHNEIDER Williamson.com.
Correct.
Good stuff, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Lee, and we love what you do, and thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
All right. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.